It's been 2 years since we've been away, and I was not supposed to be here this morning, but it just happened that God arranged it for me to be with you and to share a couple of things from the text that we read. The text is quite an amazing text. It takes us into the very person of God, who God is. It tells us that, God is, like we just sang it all. God is great, God is good, He's merciful. And with that text, we are just been marveling throughout these 35 years of ministry in France. A very difficult place for us because we left Canada, and I didn't know how to speak French. I had to learn French from scratch, basically. But Suzanne got lucky. She already spoke French all of her life. So she didn't have that challenge. She had other challenges, but my challenge was to learn French, adapt to the French culture, and also deal with my color. Oh, you're probably just, oh boy, I didn't realize I had a problem with that in Canada. But when I got to France, I realized, hey, I'm a brown person. And that doesn't pass very well. So, that's very interesting. I had to relive 30 years of history and just adapt again through all of this. So, France is a place where the church has been there for 2,000 years. 2,000 years Christianity came to France. And so, about maybe 500 years ago, when this whole process of secularization started to happen in Europe, France was giving leadership. And France is just a country that is just post-Christian, totally secularized, and we're seeing that there are some anti-Christian things coming out. As you probably noticed it in the Olympics, that was quite interesting. So I looked at the Olympic, I was amazed to see the beauty of the French creative mind. The French are just wonderfully creative people, and they just know how to do it. And so they did a great job. And then there was this a couple of things that represented their culture also in relationship to their Christian past. So the French, they love to mock. So they were just like a culture who were into mockery of themselves. They love to just mock themselves, and they like to mock other people also. And so that came out very, very strongly in the Olympics. Now, when we left for France 35 years ago, I don't think we knew what we were getting ourselves into. And probably if we knew what we were getting ourselves into, we would have thought twice about going to France. But we followed God into the heart of the French culture, and we had to deal with the unexpected, a lot of surprises. We had to go into unknown territories. We had to go through big learning curves. We had to learn to make sacrifices. And I'm from a culture that is collective. And so there are strong family ties. And so individualistic families don't really probably understand this very much. But for somebody like me, it was very painful to be far away from my family and to having to sacrifice that aspect of my cultural identity by following God's leading into a place that was very, very individualistic. So sacrifices were part of our experiences. And so in our journey throughout France over these last 35 years, we've learned a lot of stuff. We've learned to reinvent what it means to be a disciple of Christ as it works itself out in that particular context. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And so I've been traveling recently into different parts of the world, both intellectually and physically, and through my teaching. So throughout Africa, French Africa, Madagascar, and then back into Quebec for some of my stuff. And so in this encounter with with the various cultures, I have learned a lot about what we call to contextualize living out of the gospel. And so I want to just talk about that whole thing today, about living out the gospel contextually from the text that we read. And so in missiological circles that I move in presently, when we talk about engaging our culture missionally, what we're actually talking about is bringing the gospel to our culture, wherever God places us, in forms and languages that are understandable, that people can appreciate, they can connect with, they understand. And so in this text from Acts chapter 14, we're brought into a very, very unknown territory. We are into a place that knows very little about the God of Israel, the God of the Old Testament. They know nothing at all about Jesus, and this is totally new to them. Jesus for them is an outsider, okay? And that's important to get in this text. It's just so new. He's a complete stranger. And so what the apostles do in this text, they do two things, and so that's the 2 points of my sermon this morning. They show them what the gospel looks like, and then they talk to them about what the gospel looks like. And so, first of all, they show them what the gospel looks like, and in verse 7 it says that they continued to preach the good news, and this suggests that the healing of the crippled man is part of the preaching of this good news. And this is probably what happened when they arrived in Lystra, in this new city. They begin by sharing their faith with the population, as they normally do. It's Paul and Barnabas. And at one point, they realize, oh, this doesn't work, and it has no impact on people. Sometimes words are just not enough. And so we need to embody the gospel. We need to become instruments of the gospel, and people need to see it concretely at work. And so this is what the apostles do here. They show what their faith looks like in real life, the difference that it makes in human life, painful human life. This man suffering for all of his life, and you could just imagine the pain and the stigma and the shame of just being reduced and being a beggar for all of your life. And this is where God comes into the picture to show that this man he has dignity, and he needs to be shown grace and compassion and mercy. And so God reaches in, and he does to this man the unexpected, a surprising thing. And he does it not only for the man and his family, but he does it for the whole city. He wants to get the attention of everyone. And so as the miracle is performed, it went absolutely viral in the city. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody's attention is drawn to this. And this leads to the unexpected. The people, they did only what they knew what to do. They did the only thing that they knew what to do, and they did it in their language, in their mother tongue, because their Greek is just, as their second language, is just not enough to express what they're feeling at this moment. So they cry out in the local language what they're feeling in a very deep way about this miracle. And so this teaches us a lot about languages and mother languages, important mother language, mother tongue, how God speaks to us. And no wonder, we get in the Old Testament, the texts are written in Hebrew, Aramean, and so God is speaking the heart language, the mother tongue of these people. And in the New Testament, he's reaching out in Koine Greek, but Aramean also, and other dialects, to people in languages that they can understand. And the day of Pentecost, we see him doing this miracle where there is speaking in tongues, and God is saying to the whole world that's present in Jerusalem at that time that your language is beautiful. That is important to you. It is important to me also. So God he's reaching out, and he takes into account language, and the people express what they feel in their languages, and they're interpreting the miracle in the only way that they can interpret it. Like they don't know the God of the Old Testament, they don't know Jesus, they don't know anything else. So their point of reference is what we call their worldview, their traditions. And so they understand that maybe the gods, Zeus and Hermes, may have taken visible form and come among them to do something and to speak to them about an important message. And so, as a result of this understanding of what's going on, they do for them what is normal. They make sacrifices, or they're ready to make sacrifices to the gods. And Paul and Barnabas, taken very, very surprised, they do everything they were able to stop them from performing the sacrificial ritual, but the end of the text says they barely kept them from actually doing the sacrifice. We're not sure if they succeeded in doing it. In this text, I want to draw your attention to the fact that the healing of the crippled man is well adapted to this context. Okay, so if you go back up to verse 3, the miracle itself is part of showing God's undeserved grace, his mercy, his generosity, his compassion, his goodness to those who do not know Jesus. And they need to see with their own eyes God's love in action. Okay, and so God, he understands this. He understands what these people need right now in this particular place is not only a bunch of words, but they actually need to see it in concrete expressions of who this God is. And so we're dealing with an animistic and polytheistic people whose worldview connects the visible manifestations of the spiritual phenomena to the invisible world. And for them, they may be thinking this way: the gods have stepped out of the invisible world to visit us in human form, so we've got to be very, very careful to offer the right sacrifices and do the right rituals in order not to anger the gods, but to receive more blessing coming from them. So the healing is relevant for them. It connects with their worldview, their understanding of how reality works. The healing is also relevant for this people because for them, spirituality is totally useless if it does not make a difference in the real world and in everyday life. And so I read this, there's really, really good research that shows that for first century Greco-Roman society, that people's interest in spirituality is related to how it actually helps them in their everyday life. They're very pragmatic. It's a very pragmatic approach to spirituality. So the healing itself in this text is actually meant to show these people how the message of the apostles, how it connects to their daily life and what God is capable of doing to show his mercy and his goodness to them. Okay, so there's lots more that I can say about that miracle. Let's go on and talk a little bit about some of the, maybe what this may mean for us today. This miracle. So in our ministry, we have not witnessed a lot of signs and wonders at all in France, but what we have witnessed and what we have become instruments of God's work has been in ways that may seem ordinary, but God has used us in countless ways to be a blessing to other people. And so we've actually witnessed what a lot of people do not realize that is probably the greatest miracle that we can see as believers, and that's the miracle of conversion. The miracle of turning to Christ, embracing Christ, and seeing your life transformed because of Christ. So, I remember one time Suzanne, my wife, invited this person to a concert. And then after a Christian concert, after the concert, our job was to drop her home. And then after, I made the comment to Suzanne, "Are you sure this person is okay?" And she says, "Well, I'm not sure, and I'm not exactly sure what's going on in her life and stuff like that." So there was just the way the person was dressed, their demeanor, the way they carry themselves, and it was just very, very gloomy, very closed in on themselves. And after that concert and Suzanne's friendship, this person went home, and following Suzanne's advice, she started to read the New Testament. And so she read Matthew chapter 1, Matthew chapter 3, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. And by the time she got to chapter 7, she realized that her life had not been built upon the rock. So God gave her this amazing revelation. The following Sunday, this person shows up at church. And I said, "Oh, I think I know this person. Suzanne, isn't it the woman that we dropped off the other night?" This person had physically been transformed. The gospel came into her life, touched her in such a deep and profound way that there was joy. There was so much joy on her face. She discovered for the first time in her life the good news of Jesus Christ and the fact that she can build her life on Jesus, the rock. And that was the thing that just brought so much to her. So this we've witnessed these miracles of conversions over and over again in France. We have also seen God planting through our ministries 3 churches, and so that's been like, for me, that is miraculous. Like if you think about the French context, where Christianity has been for 2,000 years, and there is a total marginalization of the church and of the Christian faith, and trying to start new churches, communities of disciples of Christ, again, for that to happen, it is really a miracle. And so we've seen God helping us establish these churches. Another thing that Suzanne can talk about, if ever she makes it. By the way, she's not here right now. Did she show up? She's stuck somewhere, and she missed her flight coming back. So if she comes, she'll probably talk to you about that. So her ministry, compassion, showing in very concrete forms what the gospel looked like to our community through a thrift store. That is been a story in and of itself, and that I would classify as a miracle. A miracle that this thing has taken off, and it's taken off so much that it's become a point of reference within our city. And everybody talks about it. There's incredible respect for us because of this, and we are so thankful. First steps towards going further, but we are just so thankful to see how God has worked. So there are other things that I could talk about of how God has used us in our ministry throughout the years to bring Christ to others. However, I think that this text is important for us to understand that when we actually go out to be a witness of Christ, to be his disciple wherever he places us, that words are sometimes just not enough. Words are not enough. People need to see the transformation that's going on in our lives. They need to see that this thing is for real. Like these people have been touched by such deep love, and there is actually love flowing out of their lives. And so maybe that's one of the things that we need to pick up on as we seek to be witnesses of Christ, disciples of Christ, reaching out with the love of Christ to others in our communities, is we need to be asking the Lord to fill us with His love, more of His love. So coming here this morning, I was just so touched, maybe that's not the right word. I was just sort of struck by some of the songs on the radio. So, I listened to, I don't even know what station it was. And so I'm into this thing of analyzing culture. So I analyze everything that I hear in pop culture. And so I'm analyzing everything I'm hearing through the songs, and I'm thinking, man, this is all about love. People are hunger for love. They want to be in relationships. They want to be in good relationships with other people. And this is our message. This is our message. The message of Christ is that He wants to fill our lives with His love. With His love. And so, there are people in my life growing up that I had a hard time loving. Okay, so one of the person in my family was abusive physically to me as I grew up as a child. And I had to ask God to fill me with His love, to love this person, to fill me with His forgiveness, to show forgiveness to him. And so, attitudes, okay? Attitudes are very, very important. So, I think one of the things that this text leads us to is the embodiment. So I'll use that word, the embodiment of the gospel in our lives through the things that we do to show our kindness, our compassion, our love, our forgiveness, our patience with those that God has placed in our lives. And I think that is so important. What this text is leading us to is to realize that God wants us to become the good news to other people in the way we live it. Transformed lives. You are our letters, says Paul, known and read by everyone, letters from Christ. And what he's saying that, you can't hide it. You can't hide it. Christ has come in, and you are embodying the message. Christ has transformed our lives, and others can see it. So that's the first thing in this text, and I'll go over the second thing very, very quickly. The first thing is about showing what the gospel looked like in works, good works. But the second part of the text, after showing what the gospel looked like, is verbal, contextualized talking, speaking about what the gospel looks like. And so we get this happening in verses 15 to 17. And so they choose their words very, very carefully. So if you'll notice very carefully in this text, Jesus is never mentioned. We call it in missiological circles a contextualized, sensitive presentation of the gospel that connects with where people are at. They're not probably needing to hear the first thing about Jesus right away. That will come probably in a later conversation. But we start where people are at in talking about the good news of Christ. So what do the apostles do? They talk about the existence of the world that they can see, God the Creator. They talk about the people's history as a gift from God. God has been patient with the nations. He doesn't judge them right away. He allows them to continue to prosper, even live good lives of rejoicing and happiness. And yes, outside of the church, there are a lot of people who live good and happy lives. And we need to recognize that as a blessing of God on our larger society. If it was not for God's mercy, people would not be living happy and rejoicing lives. So in some ways, and so I get this from the great French reformer John Calvin. If you read his Institutions, he comes and he says the Holy Spirit is at work in society, producing stuff like giving people joy and happiness, for example. And so God is, he is at work in human history, faithfully loving his creation, loving human beings, created in his image. He gives concrete signs and proofs of his existence and his ongoing commitment to bless the world. And so he's not leaving himself without a witness. And this witness specifically comes through the various seasons, the crops, the fruit, the joy of celebrating the simple things in life. Oh, the French love to celebrate. And you know, when they celebrate, I'm with them and I'm saying, you know, this comes from the Creator. This comes from God. And so I celebrate the simple things in life with them, saying, thank God for all the good things that he's given to us. His rain falls upon us all. His sun shines upon us all, and rejoicing in that with people. And it is in light of all the goodness of God that Paul and Barnabas proclaims to the people and show them that they're called to embrace this God, turn away from their idols, both physically, idols of the heart. And so there's a movement in this text where there is a demonstration of God's mercy, his goodness, his grace, his compassion, and his love for creation, and at the same time calling others to turn to Christ and embrace him, the God of Jesus Christ. So there's lots more I can say, but let me just draw out a few things that I've seen that are maybe relevant in our communication to outsiders. So one of the first things I think that we need to address is the issue of learning new language that connects with people, language that actually speak to people in our circle of relationships. So if we're with young people, we need to adapt to that context, the language we use. If we're older people, we need to adapt our language, etc., etc., etc. If we're people from outside the Canadian culture, we need to think about that also, adapting our language to that population. And we call this cultural literacy, when we seek to learn the language of the context in which God has placed us. And this means that we need to learn to listen well in order to connect well in ways that people can understand. And it's like learning any language. It takes time, it takes lots of efforts, but it is possible. So, I've been learning French for the last 35 years, and I'm still learning, of course, but that was hard work. Like, I learned so much French that I was able to do a doctoral thesis in French. And everybody's just like amazed. How did you do that? Thank you, O Lord. So, in walking around and driving around the city, and in Canada, I couldn't help but noticing that Canadian society talks a lot about healing, about wellness. So I'm just giving you a couple of examples of how we can actually adapt our language, try to connect with what's going on in our society through what's already there. And as bridges, as points of that will open doors for discussions and conversations with others. So we talk about healing. We talk about wellness. We talk about safe places. We talk about celebration. We talk about personal choices, identities. We talk about freedom. We talk about tolerance, etc., etc., etc. Now, you got to kind of dig into the what's behind these various terms and concepts. But what I realize is that they can become bridges for opening up wonderful conversation with other people. And so I think we would all agree that the gospel is about holistic healing, body, soul, mind, spirit. When Jesus comes into a life, he does heal us. He does take us on a journey of healing, and the ultimate healing is coming when we see him face to face. But he already gives us signs of that healing in our lives, sometimes in our bodies. Jesus comes to us and he heals us. One of my students, I won't tell you where he's from, he is searching for Jesus, and he's in the desert all by himself, and an angel comes to him, lays his hands on him, heals him, and says to him, go and find some Christians. He's not a Christian at that time, but he gets healed, and the angel heals him in the name of Jesus and sends him to go find Christians. Okay, that's a good example of something that's quite extraordinary. It doesn't happen every day, but sometimes in our lives we have these experiences of God doing things that's extraordinary. Sometimes in our lives it's our character that needs a healing touch of God, and sometimes that comes to us through going through really, really hard things in our lives, where God teaches us lessons that we really, really need to learn. And he brings healing and transformation in our lives through brokenness, okay? And so I've been humbled. Like France has been a real humbling experience for me. All the stuff, my pride and all that has been knocked out of me. Like the wind of my self-centeredness have been knocked out of me in France. And the Lord teaching me that, it's not just all about you. It's also about others. And so God takes us on these journeys of healing personally. Now, the gospel does not make us perfect, but I think it does make us to be better neighbors, better parents, better citizens, better colleagues. And so we need to be careful to listen to these conversation and these deep longings and desires in our society for healing, for wellness, to feel better, even better about oneself. So I can go on and on and on. And let me just finish with just a personal story of how the gospel has impacted my life. So I grew up in a very large family. So my mom had 17 kids, and 12 of us survived. And, right now there are a couple of believers in my family. So I'm one of the rare ones. And I grew up not really knowing the gospel. And when I came to Canada, about in my teenage years, I was 16 years old, and God led this person into my life. A young man, 20 years old, nursing. He was doing nursing, sent from Trinidad to do nursing courses in Toronto. He came into my neighborhood, Leslie and Finch, back in the 70s, which is a really rundown neighborhood. And he showed the love of Christ to me because I was this rebellious young guy who needed help with getting through school. I was totally useless in school, but this guy helped me do my homework. And he showed the love of Christ to me. And then he preached the gospel of Christ to me. And then I became a believer, 16 years old. And so the Lord came into my life through these manifestations of Christ's love, physically, concretely, really in a way that I can understand, I could grasp. I saw it, I lived it through the life of this person, and I heard the gospel. And so may the Lord help us as we seek to shine for him, as we seek to go out and just be the gospel to other people. May he give us all that we need. Everything that we need. And it may not be very much that we need. We may just need to just go to him and just ask him, Lord, help me in this very specific area that I'm struggling with right now. in a particular relationship, just help me. And I really do believe that God will help us.